All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to finish off the Reconstruction. Basically, this was going to be a two-part, 2-day lesson, but I just decided, you know what? Let's just cram everything in together. And I tossed out some things that, they weren't really relevant. But again, this stuff is truly relevant, and it goes to explain why things were so bad that by the 1950s, we needed people like Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. Like, why were they there? Why were they needed? And this is going to basically show you why those amazing people were needed. Then, this is the beginning parts of it, and why the suppression of African Americans in the South, how it truly started. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So the objective, we're going to analyze the Grant administration. And then the last one, we're going to create an argument on whether a deal or compromise was made by Hayes. That's originally what we're going to do a question on. But the argument we're going to be having at the very, very end is going to be actually on if a president is should be blamed for his administration. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to your warm up. All right. So here it is. So my question to you is this: if you look at the guy in the hat, he says, "Let us have peace." And if you look at all those other guys around him, trying to like pulling on his shirt, grabbing his legs and some of that, they're saying, "Let us have a peace." So my question to you is this: what's the difference between his peace, PEACE, and their peace, PIECE? Now, please do not give the smart aleck remark of, well, they're spelled differently. Obviously, I got pair of eyes too. In fact, I got an extra set. But, look at the two words. What's the difference between his type of peace and the peace these guys are talking about? Okay? So take a moment, think about it, write your response, okay? Because we're going to be moving on in three, two, one. All right. So after President Johnson was um, not selected to run for president again by his own political party, they needed somebody to step up because they knew they were going to elect a Democrat. Because if they elected a Democrat, they're going to undo everything Lincoln had fought for, everything that Lincoln's Congress wanted for African Americans. So they were like, we need somebody to take the Republican mantle. And they looked at General Grant. Now, General Grant was, again, the second most popular person in America at that time. Number one was Lincoln. He was number two. Okay. Now, when he ran, he took it as a kind of a like it's my duty as a citizen of this country to save it, protect it, and do what I can. And so he's like, yeah, this is a way I can save my country. I saved it during the war. This is the aftermath. You know, so yeah, so he ran for president. Here's the problem though. He has no like political experience whatsoever, meaning he doesn't know how to, you know, understand that this person is basically lying through their teeth to him. He doesn't understand the backroom deals that are made, and the political savvy talk, and things like that. He doesn't get that. Okay. Now, like I said, he was a very popular person, but he was also very shy. He wasn't one of those people who's like standing in the middle of the room going, "Ha ha, look at me, everyone, I'm the president." Ha ha ha. No, he would actually be the guy against the wall near the door, because he wanted to get out of that place as soon as possible. Not that he didn't like, he was antisocial or anything. It's just he didn't like to be the center of attention. He didn't like everyone looking at him. He'd rather be just a regular dude, you know. Now, there's a couple things he's very famous for. One is he smoked 20 cigars a day. Okay? Now, mind you, there are 24 hours in a day, and he wouldn't smoke these little stogies. No, he'd smoke these big old giant cigars. And basically, right when he was ending with one, he'd light up another one, and things like that. So it should be no surprise to you that he died of throat cancer. The other big thing that he was an alcoholic. You know, I should really kind of take that back because again, he drank a lot. And some people would say, "Oh, that's an alcoholic." Some people wouldn't. So I'm going to refrain back on that. I'm going to take back that. But he did drink quite a bit. He was seen around the White House quite a bit with a cigar in his mouth and a glass of like whiskey and things like that. Now, here's the thing though. He wasn't also just a bad, you know, at reading people. He was bad at picking people to do a certain job. Um, his administration was full of scandals. He would basically put someone in charge, and then that person would basically go, "How can I make money from this position?" Okay. Now, I've had some students in class basically tell me, "Oh, Martinez, there's nothing wrong with that." Yeah, well, here's the thing. That's if you're the person who's doing that. But think of all the lives that this affects. This isn't just some little side business. This is the government. This affects everything these guys do affect the lives of, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of people. So for them just to be like, "Oh, I'll just take money from other people," hey, that's going to hurt other people because now other people are not going to get that money for assistance and needs and things like that. Instead, it's going to go to certain people who paid those guys off. So again, y'all need to get out of that hustler mentality especially when it comes to the government. When someone's in the government, they should not have that hustler type of mentality because that's not what the government's about. Okay. Now, speaking of which, some Republicans felt that their party was selling influence and making money their top priority. It wasn't serving the people. It wasn't making sure that people had rights and that those rights weren't trampled on. They saw it more like these guys are selling, pay for play type of thing, and that the economic system of Grant was favored more towards the rich and not the poor. And the poor people are the ones who really need help. These are the ones who really needs assistance. The rich are doing fine on their own. Why are you giving everything to them and not to the people who really need it? You know. So this upset a lot of Republicans, and they actually switched sides. They didn't go to Democrat. Instead, they created their own political party known as the Liberal Republicans. And here's the thing, too, and you'll learn this when you get into government class. Whenever a political party separates, doesn't matter if it's in half or a quarter or whatever, um, that's always bad for that political party. Because the thing is, now they're breaking off little pieces and they're not a whole party. Whereas the other side, they are a whole party. So they are still together. So they're going to have the numbers. And in politics, that's huge. So here's the thing 4 years pass and Grant is running for president again. Thing is, the Republicans are looking around going like, who else could take this role? Who else could be president? And there's not really anybody who could do it. And they know they don't want to vote Democrat, so they're like, okay, maybe this second time around, Grant will listen, he'll learn from his mistakes, and we can move on from all these scandals and things like that. Didn't happen. Again, he picked the wrong people for the wrong jobs, and there was even more scandals. Now, on top of that, the country goes through a very long and staggering economic crisis. Basically, one of the most powerful and popular banks at that time went bankrupt. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, well, how can a bank go bankrupt? Well, you have to remember, it's like this. Nowadays, we have this thing called the FDIC, where if somebody robs your bank and they take all the money, that money is federally insured, and the government will bring money to that bank so that you could withdraw money. Back then, they didn't have that stuff. So when you put your money in the bank, The bank would then lend out your money to people who want to start a business, people who want to, fill out a loan application to get, whatever. So your money went away. That dollar bills you put into the bank went away. So if you were like, oh, I want my money back, the bank might not have it. And that's the thing. Some of these banks, they would loan money to people, to farmers and factory owners and things like that. And basically, those factories went bankrupt. They didn't make a profit, so they lost everything. The farmer, bad harvest, didn't make any money. So now they're like, well, we need our money. And then people are trying to withdraw, like, hey, where's our money at? They ain't got nothing. So that's how a bank goes bankrupt. And that started the panic of 1873. Okay. Now, Grant's popularity is going down. And some Republicans feel like, you know what? I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote because if I vote for any Republican things, it's getting bad, it's getting worse. So I'll just stay home. And this is where the Democrats come out full force and they start voting and they start getting more people in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Now, as a history lover's point of view, if you look back at everything, this is the moment truly when it's like the beginning of the end of the Reconstruction. Because now the Democrats are starting to get the power and they're going to start trying to make some changes. Now, Democrats really started to gain more and more power, especially in the South. And the way they did this through fraud and intimidation. Because again, remember, African Americans have the right to vote. But what they would do is, again, those secret society hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan and some of that, they stopped African Americans from voting. They'd be at the like courthouse just waiting there. So if an African American tried to come up, be like, "Hey, I'm registered to vote. I'm gonna let me go through." They'd be like, "No, no, we're not gonna let you do that." And if he tried to say, "Well, I'm gonna get the marshal or the sheriff," well, guess what? That guy's more likely gonna side with us. The only thing that person could do is probably get some federal troops. But even then, by the time he gets some federal troops to help him out, they're going to beat him up. They're going to threaten his family. They're going to do something to him. So a lot of African Americans were like, you know what? I'm not going to vote. You know, or they tried to find certain ways to vote, and some did, some couldn't. Now, what did these Democrats promise? They basically said, you know what, look at all these high taxes for all these programs for African Americans and things like that for the Freedmen's Bureau. You know, we're going to cut those out. We're not going to take any more taxes for those guys. No, no. Who, where did you get out of that? Nothing, so that, all that taxes, you don't even get some, so we're going to cut that. And then they accused the Republicans of being corrupt, which they had to do was like look at Grant's administration. This dude, all corrupt. They have charges of corruption. You know. So the presidential election of 1876 was seen as a crusade, a holy war to save the South. So they come in full force. All these Democrats from the South come in full force to vote. The election is between Rutherford B. Hayes, a Republican, and Samuel Tilden, a Democrat. Okay. Now, the election comes and it's pretty close. Basically, there's 20 electoral college votes that are disputed because the numbers are so close that they kind of needed like a recount. Now, there were 5 states that were being recounted. All 5 were in the South. Okay, so they're Democrat states. But Tilden only needed 3 electoral college to win. He basically just needed one of 5 states. If he won any one state, he would become president of the United States. Here's the thing. Somehow, some way, Hayes wins, and it just shocks people. Like, how did this Republican win five, five, count you, five states in the South? No, 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 no. Something's up. Something's wrong here. This raised a lot of red flags. There were some Republicans who were happy, like, yeah, yeah, he won. But there were even some Republicans going, no, that doesn't sound right. Something's up here. And there was a lot of Democrats, as you see in this picture right here, tilting our blood, because they knew the odds of this guy pulling it off is like one in hextillion, one in a Googleplex. It's the odds are so astronomical. It's like no, but somehow he does. So what happened was this. Um, this is a thing that historians called the Compromise of 1877. Now there is no physical proof. There's no letters or witnesses statements that says that a deal was made, but a lot of historians basically say, yeah, there had to have been a deal made. There's no way in the world that Hayes should have won or could have won. But if you look at his actions, what he does is something a Democrat president would have done. And this is where a lot of people say, yeah, a deal was made. Something was done to where Hayes would become president, and then he in turn did things that Democrats wanted. So the first thing he did was in April 1877, he took federal troops out of the South. Now, why is that such a big deal? Because these federal troops, like I told you earlier, I'm sorry about that. I just had a little stuff. Oh my god, just come up. Oh man, that hurt, but I'm good. Thank you. Sorry. So yeah, basically, why was the federal troops removal such a big thing? Basically, the federal troops made sure that Republicans, were safe. The African Americans were safe. That the Freedmen Bureau was working efficiently. That if a law was broken, African American civil rights were tested or denied, that they would come in and fix those. Basically, enforce the laws to make sure African Americans were free, had the right to vote, um, that their contracts were not favored towards the owner, or the company person, and that everything was running hunky dory. Now that they're gone, all those laws that were in place to help African Americans, now they had no one. If something happened, there's no one to say, hey, yeah, you can't do that. There's no one there. And this is truly the end of the Reconstruction era. Okay. So African Americans are on their own. The white Republicans in the South are on their own. And yeah, things are going to get bad. Now, some people thought that now that the Democrats have taken over and the Republicans are now the minority, that they're going to clash. But what happened was they actually didn't. They actually kind of got along a little bit. Um, and it showed the world that we are a country that if we lose power, if your political party lose power, you don't, no, 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 you don't get all mad and be like, no, we're never going to give up power. You guys cheated. You guys did this and that. No, what we do is, okay, yeah, we lost. You won. Here, you're in charge now. You have the power. You know, the transition of power goes smoothly between the two political parties. That there's not one group going, no, no, you cheated. No, no, you guys did this and that. With that, we don't do that kind of stuff. You know. Uh, Now, here's the thing. There were some people in the South who were like, yeah, now that we're in power, let's bring back slavery. Let's make these guys slaves again. Let's make sure that they're not citizens, that they can't vote. And there were a lot of Southern leaders who were like, are you guys a special kind of stupid? Because here's the thing, we can't get rid of slavery because it's on the 13th Amendment, or we can't bring it back because that's what the 13th Amendment says. We can't change that. So the African Americans, they're free. And we can't say they're not citizens anymore because, again, that's the 14th Amendment. We can't change that. So get that thought out of your head. This is the way it's going to be. That old way of thinking of having slaves and we're going to be in charge of them, they can't have any rights at all. No, that's not how life's going to be. But there are things we can do to make their lives a living hell. And that's what basically they do. Um, the Democrats also basically tell the Republicans up north, we're going to be different. We're going to be a new South. And there were some Republicans like, good for you. Great. Glad to hear that you're listening to us. All right. So the North, they created more railroads and had dozens of new industry, factories, things like that. We'll be talking about more of them next class and things like that. The thing is, the South, even though they said, oh, we're going to change, they really didn't. And although they did have some industry growth, they did have some factories, it was nothing like they said they were going to do. Because again, remember, these guys saw factories, permanent buildings, excuse me, as a waste of land. You know, like, oh my God, you can grow so much cotton on that land right there that they put that factory on. You know, so for a lot of African Americans who were slaves back in the day before the Civil War, they basically saw it like we're going back to the old ways. This is like the old South. Yeah, granted they're free, they're citizens, but the treatment, the situation they are in at this point, they're like, I feel like I'm back being a slave. I'm treated horribly. I there's no one I can go to for help. You know, they are purposely like held down so that they can't progress. Okay. So what do I mean by that? It's like this. African Americans and even poor white farmers, excuse me, they became tenant farmers, meaning they have to pay for the rent for the land that they were working on. So like I gave an example in class. If you have a job, let's say you're working construction, right? Let's say your job is to create the frame of a building, right? You need tool belt, hammer, nails, things like that, screwdriver, things like that. Basically, everything you use, you would be charged for. They'd be like, oh, well, how many nails did you use? 20? Well, guess what? We're going to charge you for 20 nails. You used the hammer, so that's rent for the day for the hammer. That tool belt you have on. Oh, you used the ladder? Okay, well, that's this much. They basically charge people to work, and eventually they would become sharecroppers, you know, and sometimes they had to give up 2/3 of their stuff they grew to pay for that rent, the seeds, the fertilizer, the tools, the animals. Now, somebody asked me in class, did they need that stuff? Well, seeds and fertilizer, absolutely. Tools and animals, yeah, you're going to need it. Now, could you garden? Can you go through your crops without animals? Sure, but it's going to take forever to get that stuff, especially plowing. Plowing, you need a big animal like an ox or a bull to basically drive that plow into the ground to make to uh, to soften that dirt and stuff. That's why you see those guys. They have to hold it down so the animal pulls and they hold it down so that the plow tears through the ground, and then they could plant their crops and things like that. Um, Now, could a person do it? No. Could they pull it? Sure, but they're going to hurt themselves and they're not going to get a deep grind through the ground. It's probably gonna be very surface level, you know. So yeah, it was just horrible for these guys. And the thing is, a lot of African Americans, a large majority of them, remain poor and unable to vote for nearly 100 years, till the time of Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, people like that. You know, I read this book one time that basically said there were some African Americans in the 1950s. They were already 40 some years old. They had no idea they had the right to vote because their parents and their grandparents were basically like, what's the point of trying to vote? We're going to be hunted. We're going to be beaten. We're going to be, this bad stuff's going to happen to us if we try. So why bother? Might as well keep your family safe. So yeah, it was pretty bad. All right, so here's my question to you. Should the president be responsible for the actions of the people in his administration? What do you think? Should he, like Grant, he put all these people in charge of different departments: Secretary of War, Interior, Secretary of State, Commerce. So these guys made money for themselves as much as they could. Should the president be held responsible for appointing people like that, or should those guys be held responsible? Because again, the president can't like look over everyone's shoulder, make sure everyone's doing their job. He basically trusts them to do their job. They try to hire the best people for those jobs. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Okay, so once you finish this responding to this question, you are done with this lesson. Okay, so hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Um, and again, somebody in class asked me, forgot about this. Somebody in class asked me, where's the writing prompt? Again, guys, you're not always going to have the writing prompt. I want to see you guys try to write a complete sentence without the writing prompt. Okay. So in the previous lessons, there was a writing prompt. Right now, I want to see, can you write a complete sentence correctly without the writing prompt? Okay. So try it out. Try your best. Okay. So with that being said, guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.